The night was thick with rain, pounding against the old factory walls, echoing like war drums in a storm. Evelyn stood alone, her chest heaving as if each breath dragged up years of silence. She pressed her palms against the rusted door, trembling at the force of her own scream. Evelyn said, "Why does no one see me?" Her voice cracked, rising above the storm, raw with fury and sorrow. The world felt deaf to her pain, blind to her worth, and still she shouted as if tearing a hole through the shadows. The thunder rolled in response, a cruel mockery of her defiance. Lightning slashed across her face, illuminating tears she swore she would never let fall again. Her fists clenched as if holding the last fragments of her spirit together. Evelyn whispered, "I cannot stay invisible." The moment tore something open inside her, something she could no longer bury. A vow, fragile yet unbreakable, was born in the storm. Morning broke with a quiet cruelty, as if the storm had swallowed her rage and left nothing but silence. Evelyn trudged through the streets, soaked shoes squeaking with every step, head lowered but thoughts ablaze. She passed neighbors who barely looked at her, faces locked in their own worlds, and she wondered how many of them hid storms too. Evelyn thought, "Do they even see me at all?" Her reflection in a cracked window sneered back, showing a tired stranger she refused to recognize. She forced herself onward, the weight of night still clinging to her shoulders. Every step was a rebellion, a refusal to vanish completely. Evelyn whispered, "Today I walk forward, even if I walk alone." At the office, fluorescent lights hummed like vultures circling above, stripping the room of warmth. Evelyn slid into her seat, shoulders drawn tight, as whispers floated across the room. Co-workers spoke in hushed tones, glances darting toward her like arrows that left no wound yet stung. She clenched her jaw, pretending to be absorbed in her files, though her heart pounded with each stifled laugh. Evelyn thought, "They see weakness where there is none." She fought the urge to shrink, forcing herself to remain visible even as every instinct begged her to disappear. Lunch hour arrived, and Evelyn sat alone at a corner table, the cafeteria buzzing with laughter and chatter that excluded her. She poked at her sandwich, appetite drowned by the weight of silence pressing down. Across the room, a man leaned against the vending machine, watching her quietly. Daniel said, "You eat like the food wronged you." His voice cut through the noise, sharp but not unkind. Evelyn looked up, startled, then offered the faintest smile. It was the first time all day she felt seen, though she wasn't sure she trusted it. Later that evening, Evelyn lingered by her window, city lights shimmering like distant stars, each one alive while she felt hollow. She touched the glass, cold seeping through her fingertips, and whispered, "I will not fade." The words trembled, but they carried weight, a spark refusing to die. Behind her, shadows stretched long across the floor, but she stood still, breathing steady as if bracing herself against an unseen tide. Somewhere deep inside, a fragile strength stirred. The alarm buzzed before dawn, dragging Evelyn from restless dreams where voices of doubt echoed louder than sleep. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the floorboards, feeling the weight of yesterday settle heavy on her shoulders. The city outside stirred with muffled sounds, yet her room clung to silence. Evelyn thought, "I am already behind before the day begins." She rubbed her temples, forcing herself to stand, legs stiff from exhaustion that felt deeper than sleep could cure. The mirror across the room showed her a woman with eyes shadowed by fatigue, yet burning faintly with defiance. She whispered, "You are still here." The words were fragile, but they mattered. Evelyn walked briskly down the crowded street, the chill morning air sharp against her skin. Cars honked, vendors shouted, and people moved in currents that never seemed to carry her along. She clutched her bag tightly, trying to keep pace but always feeling a step apart. A man brushed past, muttering under his breath, as if her presence were an inconvenience. Evelyn thought, "I do not belong anywhere, not even in the rhythm of the city." Yet with each step she refused to stop, carving space for herself where none was offered. Her breath steamed in the air, merging with the exhaust rising from the street, a fragile thread against the chaos. At work, Evelyn faced the stack of reports piled higher than her patience. Fingers tapped impatiently on desks nearby, the rhythm of a world racing without her. She focused on the papers, each number blurring until it felt like punishment. A supervisor walked past without acknowledgement, as if she were furniture rather than flesh. Evelyn thought, how many years can a person remain unseen before disappearing altogether? She forced herself to type, keys clicking sharp against her nerves, as though every keystroke was an act of survival. She whispered softly, keep going, though no one else could hear. Lunch came, but Evelyn had no appetite. She sat again at her corner table, tray untouched, staring at her hands resting in her lap. The cafeteria buzzed with laughter and chatter, but her seat remained an island. Daniel walked past, slowing briefly to glance her way. He smirked, then said, "You brood harder than anyone I know." His words, blunt and teasing, carved through her silence like a crack of light. Evelyn lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes, unsure whether to bristle or accept the intrusion. The truth was simple. His bluntness reminded her she still existed. That night, Evelyn walked home beneath flickering street lamps. The city quieter now, shadows stretching long on cracked sidewalks. Her footsteps echoed against brick walls, each one measured and deliberate. She replayed Daniel's words, unsure if they were insult or strange kindness. She thought, why does it matter so much that someone noticed? The question clung to her, unsettling yet comforting. The chill air wrapped around her like an old cloak, but inside, a spark smoldered. She whispered, "I will not vanish." The vow returned, not as a scream this time, but as a quiet fire she refused to let die. The morning began with tension, sharp as broken glass. Evelyn entered the office, her steps echoing across linoleum floors, only to feel stares follow like shadows. A whisper floated, too quiet to catch yet too pointed to ignore. She sat, eyes fixed on her desk, heart hammering at the weight of judgment pressing from every direction. Evelyn thought, they want me to fail. A co-worker smirked in the corner, passing a note that drew muffled laughs. She clenched her jaw, refusing to react. Her fingers tapped the desk in steady rhythm, each beat a battle to hold herself together. Evelyn whispered, "I am not theirs to break." Later that day, Evelyn faced her supervisor across the desk, his voice sharp with criticism that cut deeper than the words themselves. He listed errors that weren't hers, shifting blame without hesitation. Her throat burned with the urge to defend herself, but she swallowed it down, hands folded tightly in her lap. Evelyn thought, if I speak, they'll call me fragile. If I stay silent, they'll think me weak. The clock ticked loud in the silence between his words, each second a hammer striking her patience. She whispered, "I hear you," though her mind screamed louder truths he would never listen to. By afternoon, Evelyn sat in the restroom stall, clutching the edge of the sink as if it anchored her to the world. The mirror reflected a face pale with strain, eyes rimmed red from holding back tears she refused to show outside. Evelyn thought, they cannot see me break. She splashed cold water on her skin, the sting grounding her as whispers of laughter from the hall slipped through the door. She pressed her palms flat against the sink, forcing her breath steady. She whispered, "You are stronger than this storm." Her reflection seemed unconvinced, but her voice carried a spark of defiance. In the break room, Evelyn poured coffee with hands that trembled too slightly for others to notice. Daniel entered, glancing her way with his usual sharp gaze. He said, "You let them trample you, they'll never stop." His tone was blunt, but his eyes carried weight. Evelyn froze, cup halfway lifted, unsure if she wanted comfort or to lash back. She replied, "It's not so simple." Daniel leaned against the counter, shrugging. He said, "It never is, but hiding won't save you." His words lingered like smoke, unsettling but true, forcing Evelyn to face what she had long denied. The day ended with Evelyn walking through the empty hallway, her footsteps echoing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She thought of Daniel's words, of the laughter, of the silence she carried like armor. The walls seemed to close in, gray and endless, each door a reminder of rooms where she was never truly welcome. Evelyn thought, I cannot stay invisible forever. She reached the exit, pausing beneath the flicker of a dying bulb, its light unsteady but still burning. She whispered, they will see me, even if I have to tear myself open. The vow surged again, no longer fragile but fierce. The sky pressed low with gray clouds as Evelyn sat alone in her apartment, the silence inside louder than the city noise beyond the walls. Bills and unopened letters covered her table, each envelope a reminder of burdens waiting to break her down. She gripped one tightly, unable to open it, heart pounding at the thought of failure. Evelyn thought, I am suffocating under weight no one else sees. Her chest heaved, every breath shallow, as if the air itself conspired against her. She whispered, if I collapse now, I may never rise again. The silence swallowed her words whole. The next morning, Evelyn walked into the office only to find her project reassigned without her knowledge. Colleagues avoided her gaze, though their smirk spoke volumes. Her stomach tightened as her supervisor announced the change casually, as though her effort meant nothing. Evelyn thought, they erase me while I am still standing here. Rage surged through her veins, hot and sharp, but her hands stayed folded on the desk. She whispered, I will not give them my tears. Her silence tasted bitter, but it carried a vow she would not let fade again. At lunch, Evelyn sat outside on a bench, wind biting against her coat. She picked at her food without tasting, staring at the ground as footsteps approached. Daniel sat beside her, no invitation asked. He said, they want you small because they're afraid when you stand tall. Evelyn looked at him, the words cutting deeper than his usual sarcasm. She replied softly, you make it sound so simple. Daniel smirked faintly and said, it is. You either vanish or you fight. His bluntness left no space for escape, and her chest tightened at the truth she long feared. That evening, Evelyn returned home to find a voicemail from her mother, reminding her of all the expectations she had yet to meet. The words echoed in her ear, layered with years of quiet disapproval and unspoken comparison. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, phone clenched in her hand like a weapon. Evelyn thought, even home is not safe. The weight of family, work, and her own silence pressed into her chest until tears slipped free despite her resolve. She whispered, I am breaking. Yet even in that breaking, she felt the faintest spark of resistance flicker to life. The night deepened, and Evelyn stepped out onto the balcony, the city sprawling beneath her like a restless beast. The wind carried echoes of laughter from nearby apartments, each sound reminding her of a life she did not live. She gripped the railing, leaning forward, as if daring the darkness to swallow her whole. Evelyn thought, this cannot be all there is. Her voice rose above the hum of traffic, shaking but resolute. She whispered, I will not vanish into silence. For the first time, the vow burned within her not as desperation, but as defiance. The office buzzed with restless energy when Evelyn discovered the folder left open on her desk. Inside were documents she had worked tirelessly on, now signed under another's name. Her chest tightened, heat rising to her face, as realization hit. Her work had been stolen. A laugh echoed from across the room, mocking without words. Evelyn thought, they take not because I am weak, but because they fear I might rise. Her hands shook, gripping the folder like it could tether her fury. She whispered, no more silence. For the first time, anger burned brighter than fear, demanding action. Later that day, Evelyn cornered her supervisor, holding the stolen documents in trembling hands. Her voice wavered at first but grew steadier with every word. She said, this is mine, and you know it. His face hardened, but his silence betrayed guilt. Evelyn's heart thundered, sweat prickling at her neck, yet she refused to step back. She thought, this is the moment they hoped I would never take. For once her voice rose not from desperation, but conviction. She whispered, I will not be erased. The words hung in the air, heavier than the walls closing in. That evening, Evelyn walked through the nearly empty office when Daniel approached, leaning against the doorway with his usual calm. He said, I saw what you did today. About time you stopped letting them bleed you dry." Evelyn met his eyes, startled by the rare note of approval in his voice. She said, "It felt like stepping off a cliff." Daniel smirked faintly and replied, "Sometimes falling is how you learn you can fly." The words struck deep, both a warning and encouragement. Evelyn thought, "Maybe I am stronger than the cage they built for me." At home, Evelyn spread the documents across her table, tracing the lines of her stolen work with trembling fingers. Her apartment felt smaller, as though the walls knew her secret. She thought, "They will bury me if I let them." Her reflection in the window showed a woman no longer cowering, but sharpening into resolve. She whispered, "I will take back what is mine." The vow no longer felt fragile, but a fire building from deep within, threatening to consume every doubt she ever carried. Tonight, she did not feel small. She felt like someone preparing for war. The next morning, Evelyn walked into the office with a steadiness no one expected. Conversations halted, glances trailed after her as if sensing a change. She carried the folder, not as burden, but as weapon. Evelyn thought, "They will see me now." She sat at her desk with deliberate calm, her presence louder than words. Daniel passed, catching her eye, and gave the smallest nod. She whispered, "This is only the beginning." For the first time, silence felt like power, not a prison but a choice she commanded. The meeting room was too quiet, the hum of the projector, and the faint scratch of pens against paper the only sounds. Evelyn stood slowly, every muscle stiff but unwilling to yield. She held the folder in her hands, and though her fingers trembled, her gaze did not falter. She stepped forward, laying the papers on the table with a sound sharper than any voice. Her heart pounded so loud she wondered if the others could hear, yet her voice carried clear when she said, "This work is mine, and I will not let my name be erased." Her supervisor blinked, his mouth tightening, but silence betrayed him. Evelyn thought, "For years I drowned in the shadows, hoping silence would keep me safe, but silence was only their weapon." Her chest rose, trembling with both fear and power. She whispered, "Today I stand, even if it breaks me." The words hung like lightning in the air, impossible to ignore. A wave of murmurs broke across the table, the sound of restless unease filling the silence Evelyn had shattered. Her supervisor slammed his palm against the desk, the clap echoing like thunder. He leaned forward, voice rising in fury. He said, "You don't know what you're risking. You don't understand the cost." His face reddened with rage, but Evelyn did not flinch. Her fingers dug into the folder until the paper crumpled, grounding her against the fear clawing at her chest. She thought, "I have risked my voice for too long, and the cost has been my life itself." Her body trembled, but her voice did not. She whispered, "I will not be silenced again." The declaration carried across the room, steady as stone, heavy as truth. The walls themselves seemed to lean inward, holding the weight of her words. For the first time, she felt the storm inside her was not destruction, but strength unleashed. The tension was unbearable, until Daniel's voice rang out from the back, slicing through the air with surgical precision. He said, "She's right. Everyone here knows who that work belongs to." His tone was calm, but laced with iron, undeniable and final. The room shifted, as if the very air had tilted in Evelyn's favor. Heads turned, eyes darted, and whispers ceased. Evelyn's chest tightened, her breath hitching, stunned by the support she had never expected. She thought, even the bluntest voice can choose truth, and when truth is spoken, it cannot be buried again. Her supervisor's face paled, his body rigid, his power unraveling in silence. Evelyn looked around the room. The colleagues who once whispered now forced to see her. She whispered, "I am done being invisible." Her words cut deeper than Daniel's, not because they were louder, but because they came from the fire she had long hidden. Her supervisor shot to his feet, his chair scraping across the floor, voice shaking with rage. He said, "This is insubordination, and you'll regret it." But the power in his words was already gone. Colleagues exchanged uncertain glances, a few nodding toward Evelyn, silent solidarity glowing like faint sparks. she thought. The silence that once drowned me now rises to hold me up. Her hands loosened at her sides, no longer clutching the folder as shield, but letting it rest, as if her voice alone was weapon enough. Heat spread through her chest, not the fire of panic, but the fire of freedom. She whispered, "I will not shrink for your comfort." The words fell like thunder in the small room, breaking his brittle authority. In that instant, Evelyn understood. Survival was never silence. It was strength sharpened by struggle, claimed in defiance, owned without apology. The meeting dissolved in uneasy silence, but Evelyn walked out with footsteps echoing steady against the hall. Each step was lighter than the last, the storm inside her no longer tearing her apart but clearing the path before her. She had carried silence as armor for years, but now silence bowed to her, no longer weapon but choice. Daniel's stride fell into rhythm beside her, his presence steady, his expression unreadable but warm. He said, "That's the woman they'll never forget." His words struck deep, not because she needed them, but because they confirmed what she already knew. Evelyn thought, "I am no longer the shadow." Her hand brushed the folder at her side, but she realized she no longer needed it as proof. She whispered, "I am the voice they cannot unhear." The vow that once wavered now roared steady and unstoppable. She had walked into the storm and emerged not broken, but as the storm itself. The office returned to its usual rhythm, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, voices weaving through the space. But when Evelyn walked down the hallway, the air shifted. Her steps echoed with deliberate calm, each one a statement of presence. Heads turned, some subtle, some brazen, as colleagues watched her pass. No whispers rose, no laughter trailed her. There was only recognition, a weight in their eyes that had never been there before. Evelyn thought, "They finally see me, not as background, not as shadow, but as someone who will no longer bend to silence." The fear that once chained her had unraveled, leaving strength in its place. She whispered, "I will never vanish again." That evening, Evelyn stepped into the city streets, neon glowing like fire in the dusk. The noise of traffic, footsteps and laughter surrounded her, yet for the first time she felt part of its pulse, not drowned by it. She thought, "For years I walked like a ghost unseen, and now the world feels alive beneath my feet." Her reflection appeared in a shop window, clear and solid, no longer a stranger but herself, tired, scarred, and strong. Every light seemed brighter, every sound sharper, as if her senses had been waiting for this moment of release. She whispered, "I belong here." The words were not fragile this time, they were rooted, certain, carrying through the night like a vow etched into the air. Daniel's footsteps joined hers, steady and casual, but his presence was unmistakable. He said, "You finally learned what I saw all along." His voice lacked sarcasm this time, carrying something closer to respect. Evelyn turned her head, the faintest smile tugging her lips, rare but genuine. She replied, "It took breaking to find the strength inside me." Her voice was steady, not as confession but as truth. Daniel smirked faintly and said, "Then don't ever forget it." The city lights flickered across their faces as they walked side by side, their strides in rhythm. Evelyn thought, "For once, I am not following anyone's path. I am creating my own." The thought did not scare her. It steadied her, like a compass fixed to true north. Back at her apartment, Evelyn stood at the window, the city sprawling endlessly before her. She had once pressed her hand to this same glass in despair, whispering words that felt fragile, words she feared no one would hear. Tonight, she pressed her hand against it again, but not in longing, this time in claim. The skyline glowed alive, neon and headlights burning like a promise written across the horizon. She thought, "This world is not beyond me. It is mine to walk." She inhaled deeply, chest rising with breath steady and free. She whispered, "I am here." The words no longer trembled, no longer clung to the edges of fear. They were rooted, firm, resonant, a declaration that belonged to no one but her. The final morning came with sunlight breaking across the horizon, spilling warmth into streets that once felt cold and hostile. Evelyn stepped outside, the air crisp, her stride light yet unshakable. She thought, I was once unseen, but I rose. She carried Daniel's words in memory, but for the first time, it was her own voice that rang loudest. She whispered, I have the courage to be vulnerable, and in it, I found my strength. The city stretched ahead, no longer a battlefield she feared, but a landscape she could claim. Her steps echoed with certainty, a rhythm not of survival but of living fully. The storm had not destroyed her, it had shaped her, carved her into something unbreakable. She walked into the sunlight, not as shadow, but as flame, leaving the silence behind forever.